What if who you are right now is the single largest reason your life keeps looping the same story? And what if, with a small, repeatable shift, that loop could be broken? As Seth, the intelligence channeled by Jane Roberts, often frames it, identity creates reality. Not as a mystical slogan, but as a practical observation. The pattern you call me behaves like gravity, pulling circumstance, sensation, and relationship into the orbit of what it already knows. Hear that as a proposition, not a decree. Seth's language is poetic and precise. He names the human condition in a way that can be used like a map. You are not the person you remember, he says through Jane Roberts, not to provoke guilt, but to offer possibility. Our identity is not fixed. It is a pattern we can learn to shift. Imagine a river worn deep by centuries of water. The current knows its course. The banks are built by repetition. You have been floating in this river, and you know every eddy and rock. It feels familiar. The body, the animal that carries you, prefers this river because it knows the chemistry of that water. New currents feel like danger. New territory tastes like risk. So the first challenge isn't willpower, it's chemistry and habit. The river resists being rerouted. This is the diagnosis. Personality is a loop, a compound of thoughts, actions, and feelings that self-perpetuate. Those three together forge pathways in your nervous system. Over years, those pathways become the default circuits your brain runs on when you're not paying attention. You can want something different with all your heart, but until the body stops insisting on the old chemistry, it will steer you back to the same places. To make this real, let me tell you about Maya. For 6 years, she woke to the same inner script. I will be left behind. In subtle ways, she ordered her days to prove that script true. She chose partners who confirmed abandonment, complied silently with opportunities that felt unsafe, and lived with a continual low-grade cortisol hum that she called energy. She hated the pattern and clung to it at the same time. At a retreat, she tried an experiment. She wrote a precise sentence about her future self and sat for 60 seconds feeling what that sentence would feel like in her chest. She did not conjure fireworks. She felt a small warmth, like a hearth lit in a cold room. Over weeks, she began to notice small shifts. Conversations that used to devolve into distance stayed open. A friend invited her to a job that matched the sentence she had practiced. Did the practice cure anything? No. Did it change the dynamic she had been unconsciously recreating? For her, yes, and it came as a slow rearrangement, not a dramatic miracle. This is the key. Change does not have to be dramatic to be real. It often arrives as repatterning, a new habit installed in the machinery of the nervous system. That machinery has its own loyalties. It runs on chemicals and rhythms. It remembers. Before we go further, a brief important note. What follows is presented as an experiment and an educational framework drawn from channel teachings, Seth as transmitted through Jane Roberts, from practice-based retreat observations, and from emerging neuroscience that points toward coherent patterns. It is not medical advice. If you have health conditions, psychiatric diagnoses, or are undergoing clinical treatment, please consult your healthcare providers before changing any regimen. Think of this as a laboratory you run on yourself with care, curiosity, and measurement. There is a simple formula at the heart of the way Seth frames creation. Choose the future, feel it now, train the nervous system to accept the new state, and then sustain it. The simplicity is deceptive. The practice is precise. These 4 steps, decide, feel, rewire, sustain, will be our scaffolding. Each step has practical edges. How to form an identity statement that actually lands in your body. How to generate an emotion that isn't faked, but is felt. How to shift brain and heart rhythms so the body believes the future is already real. And how to keep that coherence so your days begin to unfold differently. Start with the first step, decide. Not wish, decide. This is where most people get stuck. They feather their intention with qualifiers and polite uncertainty. Decide with specificity. I want abundance is an invitation. I will be someone who wakes each morning with quiet confidence, choosing work that aligns with my values, and saying no with calm is a decision that supplies an inner architecture. The brain loves specificity. When you state who you will be in actionable terms, the mind knows what to rehearse. The nervous system knows what chemistry to support. But deciding alone is not enough. The ancient insight Seth repeats is that we create from a field of feeling, not merely from ideas. This is where the second step, feel the future now, takes over. It asks you to generate the elevated emotion that belongs to your future identity.
not manufacture a performance of happiness, but to cultivate a physiological tone, a softening in the chest, a warmth behind the sternum, a steady rhythm in the breath. Seth's phrasing invites you to take on the inner taste of that future. You practice until the feeling becomes an attractor. Notice how these two actions, a precise decision plus a felt state, begin to game the nervous system. When you sit with an intention and hold the corresponding feeling for an extended enough window, you create a pattern. Neurons that fire together wire together. Hormone pulses accompany those firing patterns. Rehearse enough, and the body begins to anticipate, to secrete the chemistry that matches the felt future instead of the felt past. Here a scientific voice can help translate without flattening the mystical.
We can talk about brain waves in plain language. When your attention is hunting and reactive, racing through to-do lists, fretting, your brain tends to run in high beta. Beta is excellent for focusing on the problems of the moment, but it is a poor medium for creative rewiring. When you let the mind widen into alpha, you enter a more receptive state. Pictures and images start to feel plausible. Allow the mind to soften into theta, and you open the door to deep rehearsal and suggestion. Theta is the brain's offline mode, where new programs can be installed. When practice and coherence are sustained, gamma activity often follows. Short bursts of synchronized brain cells that correlate with integration, insight, and a felt sense of aha or wholeness. Each of these ranges is not better or worse, they are tools. What we want is skillful access. Simultaneously, the heart matters not only as metaphor, but as physiology. Heart rate variability, HRV, reflects how flexible your nervous system is. Higher coherence between heart rhythms and emotional tone correlates with clearer decision-making, calmer presence, and a greater capacity to sustain elevated feeling. Practices that calm the breath and bring intentional attention to the heart improve this coherence. When heart and brain align, the field you inhabit changes. You don't need to be an expert in EEG graphs or HRV to feel the effect. The instruction is simple. Create a habit where you spend a few minutes daily generating the emotion of your future in the chest and allowing the breath to slow into deeper cycles. The specifics of how to do that will come later. For now, grasp the logic: intention, feeling, physiological pattern. This is also where the war in you becomes visible. The conscious mind wants to move. The body, trained by decades of predictable chemistry, screams for stability. That scream isn't malicious, it's biochemical survival. Your nervous system prefers predictable hormone trajectories because predictability is economical. When you offer it novelty, a new emotional temperature, it penalizes that novelty with discomfort, restlessness, itchiness, sudden tiredness, or strong urges to revert to familiar patterns. You will hear all kinds of justifications from the body. You always fail. This is unsafe. Or wait until tomorrow. These are not truths. They are protective reflexes. Recognize them with curiosity. They are the resistance that tells you where the new installation is most needed. A short practical invitation, not a full guided meditation, but a probe you can try now. Sit with your back supported, eyes open or closed, and bring to mind a precise sentence about your future self. Keep it short, one line that describes a characteristic you want embodied. Feel that sentence for 60 seconds in your chest. Don't force a fake smile. Simply notice whatever warmth or uplift appears. If nothing appears, cultivate gratitude. Imagine one small thing that would have to be true for that future sentence to be true, and feel gratitude for it for 1 minute. This micro-rehearsal is the seed. Do it and notice even the smallest change in posture, breath, or thought. Treat it as data. If this proposition lands on you, that identity is mutable, and that a method exists to begin shifting it, you might want a map for the first steps. Consider the 7-day experiment as a compact field lab. It's not a cure-all, it's a focused period of concentrated rehearsal, a daily bracketed practice that gives the nervous system a predictable window in which to experience novelty repeatedly. The structure is simple and adaptable. A morning set, intention plus heart feel, for 3 to 5 minutes. 2 short midday rehearsals, 60 seconds each, and an evening reflection with a longer practice, 15 to 30 minutes, where you lean into imagery and sustained feeling. 1 day in the week, allocate an extended period, a walking meditation, or a prolonged rest with breath focus practice to deepen theta access. The point is not time spent, but coherence cultivated. When we ran focused retreats built around this protocol, we observed patterns worth attention. Participants reported subjective shifts in 3 to 7 days, small but meaningful changes in choices, mood, and relational tone. Some physiological markers, notably HRV coherence, trended upward in group averages during the immersive week. Random number generator, RNG patterns, used experimentally to test field effects, showed occasional deviations during sustained group coherence sessions. These are intriguing but not definitive, and are reported as observations in controlled contexts, not as incontrovertible proof. Anecdotes of dramatic healing exist within retreat stories, yet they are individual testimonials, not universal guarantees. We present them as invitations to experiment, not promises. The third step of the formula, train the nervous system, is the doorway into technique. Here the language gets a little more mechanical, and we must be careful. We will describe mechanisms in accessible terms and offer practices that are safe and practical. You will learn to move from beta into alpha and theta states using breath, heart focus, and simple attention shifts. You will learn to hold the feeling long enough that the body begins to accept it as familiar. You will also be invited to carry the feeling into behavior, to rehearse new gestures, words, and choices that align with the identity you are cultivating. But before we dive into the technical scaffolding that supports theta access and gamma integration, let's pause on an ethical nuance. Changing identity is not the same as erasing experience. The aim is not to dismiss pain or avoid necessary grief. Seth's emphasis on creation operates best from wholeness, not denial.
The work asks you to include your past, to acknowledge the stories that have been true, and then to intentionally engender a future that is more generous to you. This is the difference between pretending you never hurt and choosing to no longer let old patterns dictate current behavior. Consider another story, this one about Tomas. He had been an emergency nurse for 15 years. The trauma of the job had hardened him into a person who never relaxed. He wore competence like armor and converted rest into guilt. At a weekend intensive, Tomas committed to a single-line future identity. I am someone who rests without guilt and returns to service from a place of replenishment. He practiced the minute-long heart feel in the morning, 2 micro-rehearsals during shift breaks, and a 10-minute evening imagery session. After a week, he reported feeling less reactive to sudden alarms, more present with patients, and an edge of softness in his voice when he came home. He also reported nights of odd dreams and a sudden wave of exhaustion midweek, classic signs that the body was renegotiating its chemistry. That discomfort was part of the process. It required patience and compassion, not punishment. Stories like Maya's and Tomas's are not data sets, they are invitations. They show the texture of change, modest, often nonlinear, and highly individual. They also demonstrate the importance of small, repeatable acts over grandiose efforts. Rehearsal is the engine. We are now at the threshold of the technical portion, where we will describe specific breath patterns, the role of the pineal as a metaphoric radio receiver, how cerebrospinal fluid flow might be implicated in subtle shifts of perceptual bandwidth, and how gamma integration can feel like the crossing of a river. We will also carefully map the nervous system mechanics so that you know what to expect. Signs of beta pull, markers of alpha receptivity, indicators of theta receptiveness, and the subjective taste of early gamma coherence. I will guide you through simple, safe practices that have been used in retreat settings and adapted for daily life. Before we step into that deeper terrain, take a moment to hold the formula in your mind. Decide, feel, rewire, sustain. See it like a 3-part knot that, when tightened in sequence, holds a new structure. Picture yourself on the riverbank, a pack strapped on your shoulders, and the far shore glowing with a future self you can recognize and love. The first step across is a deliberate choice. The second is the feeling that moves feet and heart. The third is the skillful shift of nervous system rhythms. The fourth is the daily carrying of that state into ordinary moments. If you are feeling curiosity, that is the right starting point. If you are skeptical, that too is useful.
Approach this as an experiment. Set a clear intention for what you will test. Keep a journal of what changes and measure what you can. Mood, sleep, HRV if available, and the micro choices you make differently. We are inviting you to inhabit the laboratory of your life with gentle rigor. In the next segment, we will translate those high-level pieces into precise practices, breathing patterns that modulate CSF pressure and prime alpha rhythms, heart-focused techniques that build coherence, mental rehearsal structures for effective identity statements, and a guided plan for the 7-day experiment with suggested microsessions. We will also look more closely at the brainwave progression, what alpha looks like subjectively, how theta feels in the body, what gamma glimpses are like, and how to recognize when your nervous system is saying yes to a new pattern. For now, stand with your decision. Name the one-line identity you will begin testing. Feel it in your chest for 60 seconds. Notice the river, and notice the first coolness of a new current moving at the edge. The crossing awaits, and the first stones are already under your feet. If this invitation lands with you, if the idea of testing a small, repeated change feels like the cleanest act of courage you can take right now, then pause for a breath, and if you want, subscribe for the guided tracks and the 7-day experiment sheet linked below. Treat it as a laboratory sign-up, not a club initiation. Download the outline, print one page, and commit to measuring what you can. Now we move into the work of doing. We promise to translate the poetry into procedure, the channeled aphorism into repeatable technique. That means we will step gently but precisely into the biology that supports interchange and into the simple, safe protocols that make the nervous system bend toward novelty. We will be practical about breath rates, we will be conversational about brainwaves, and we will be careful about claims. What follows is a map and a set of experiments to run on yourself with curiosity. Let Seth speak for a moment, labeled as such because the voice matters. You are a field of possibility. Your body is a servant and a witness. Do not make an enemy of it. Learn to speak to it with patience, and it will translate intention into habit. Read that as a framing. The body is not your opposition, but a collaborator that has been conditioned to survive. Your job is to create consistent new inputs that the body can learn to accept. To rewire, first understand the terrain. Imagine the nervous system as a river delta with several distinct channels. At the surface is beta current, fast, agitated, focused on solving immediate problems. Below that is alpha, a broadening tide where images and metaphors have room to arrive. Deeper still is theta, an offline current where long-term impressions can be laid down like sediment. Occasionally, when many channels align, a bright streak of coherence called gamma appears, a sudden synchronization that feels like insight, integration, or wholeness. Scientist guide translation. Think of these as operational modes rather than moral categories. Beta is for high-focus tasks and survival prompts. You need it. Alpha is for creativity and relaxed attention. Theta is where deep learning and suggestion are most available. Gamma is an indicator that previously separate networks are firing together. None of these states is the enemy. The challenge is access and sequence. If you try to force gamma from high beta, the body resists. If you slow the breath and open the heart first, alpha and theta become reachable, and integration follows more reliably. A practical piece of anatomy that shows up often in retreat narratives is the pineal, historically described as a kind of perched antenna or third eye. When we say pineal here, we are using both metaphor and physiology. The pineal gland sits tucked in the center of the brain and is sensitive to light cycles and to changes in cerebrospinal fluid dynamics. In many contemplative traditions, it is imagined as a crystalline receiver. In contemporary language, it's a hub for rhythm and timing. Breath patterns and postural changes subtly alter cranial pressures and CSF flow. These changes can shift the ease with which different brain rhythms emerge. That doesn't mean the pineal will grant mystical powers on command. It means that the fluid, pressure, and neural environment of the central nervous system are part of the physiological mechanism by which internal states change. Concrete breath guidance, plain and safe. Slow, even breathing in a rhythm of approximately 5 to 6 full breaths per minute. For most people, that is about a 5-second inhale and a 5-second exhale, reliably shifts the nervous system toward parasympathetic dominance and increases heart-brain coherence. This pattern is widely used in HRV biofeedback studies because it encourages a sinusoidal heart rhythm and deeper vagal tone. Start there as a daily baseline. If you have cardiovascular conditions, blood pressure concerns, or are on medications that affect heart rate, check with your clinician before changing breathing routines. The practice is gentle. Sit comfortably, lengthen the exhale slightly, for example, inhale for 4 counts, exhale for 6, and repeat for 3 to 5 minutes. Notice the felt change more than the perfection of the mechanics. Alongside breath, heart-focused attention is the second pillar. The coach voice invites you to a short, repeatable micro-practice. Place your palm lightly over the center of your chest, soften the jaw, and expand your attention to include the area around the heart.
Bring to mind a small image associated with the future you decided on. Not a grand montage, but one real scene, like a morning coffee shared with someone who treats you kindly, or a calm response to an unexpected email. For 60 seconds, feel the corresponding warmth or gratitude in the chest and allow breathing to remain slow and even. This activates heart-brain coherence and creates a bodily tone that the nervous system can learn to expect. Do this morning and evening as the spine of your 7-day experiment. We promised actionable protocols and observable signposts. Here are reliable markers that a state change is unfolding. Breath slows without effort, the face muscles soften. There is a transient sense of time dilation. Minutes feel like more, and at times you notice a cascading reduction in intrusive thoughts. People also report energetic sensations, a warmth in the chest, a tingling at the crown of the head, or a sense of the room shifting. Those reports should be treated as subjective data, interesting, often correlated with self-reports of behavior change, but not mechanistic proof. Use whatever you feel as signals for whether to persist, adapt, or pause. To help translate the felt states into nervous system learning, we will use the idea of rehearsal as installation. Imagine installing a new application on your phone by running it repeatedly in different contexts until it becomes a background process. Rehearsal requires two things: repetition and contextual variability. Repeat the heart-feeling micro-practice each morning, but also patch it into real life. Before a meeting, before a difficult conversation, while approaching a phone call, hold the feeling for 30 seconds. This signals to the body that the new state is not confined to the cushion. It is operable in action. Rehearsal in varying contexts accelerates generalization. A practical, coachable script you can use when resistance shows up. Speak to the body kindly and specifically. Try something like, "Thank you, body, for keeping me safe all these years. I am asking you to try something different for a few minutes each day. I will go slowly. If you need me to stop, I will listen." This non-confrontational tone reduces the fight or flight escalation the body often assumes when novelty appears. In retreats, facilitators used similar scripts to reduce the intensity of resistance and to invite curiosity rather than compliance. Now let's map the 7-day experiment in precise, usable terms. This is a scaffold you can adapt for life constraints. The point is coherent repetition, not heroic time commitment. Day 0, preparation. Choose one-line identity and set measurement plan. Write the sentence in present tense, one line, precise and embodied language. Example, I am someone who greets each morning with steady calm and chooses work that aligns with my values.
Choose one small metric to measure each day: mood on a 1 to 10 scale, minutes of focused work, or HRV coherence score if you have a wearable. Day 1 through 7, daily structure. Morning, 3 to 7 minutes. Sit for the heart feeling practice. Bring the one-line identity into mind. Feel it in the chest for at least 90 seconds, while breathing at 5 breaths per minute for the last minute. Journal one quick line about posture or mood. Midday, 2 micro-rehearsals, 60 to 90 seconds each. Pause twice during the day. Hold the chest feeling, breathe, and imagine one small action aligned with the identity. For example, say no to one thing that does not serve. Evening, 15 to 30 minutes. Imagery and integration period. This is the longer practice where you allow alpha-theta access. Begin with 5 minutes of slow breath and heart focus. Move into guided imagery. Visualize a scene in which you are living the identity. Notice sensory details, what you wear, how you speak, the cadence of your breath, and sit with the feeling. End with gratitude for one small evidence of the day that supports the new identity. Record a short journal entry, 3 lines about a change, a resistance, and an experiment for tomorrow. One extended practice day, choose day 4 or 5. Replace the evening practice with a 45 to 90-minute walking meditation or restful session, where you alternate 10 to 20-minute periods of heart-focused breath and relaxed movement. If you can join a group coherence session, in person or online, include that during this extended day. Weekly measurement. Track your chosen metric each morning. If you have an HRV device, take a resting HRV measure each morning and evening. If HRV is not available, record qualitative measures: sleep quality, mood, appetite, stress responses. The goal is to collect data, not to chase perfection. Adaptations for busy days. If you only have 2 minutes, do 1 myo-feeling micro-practice in the chest and 3 slow breaths. If you have 10, do morning plus 1 midday micro-session. Safety note: if any practice elicits severe emotional flooding, for example dysregulated panic, dissociation, or intense suicidal ideation, stop and seek professional support. These techniques are meant to be supportive.
They are not a substitute for psychotherapy or medication when needed. We promise technical descriptions without turning the script into dense neuroscience, a brief deep dive that translators and editors can chapter out for those who want more. Beta, the alerting state. Subjectively, the world feels urgent. Biologically, there is increased norepinephrine and cortisol. Attention narrows. Useful for tasks, harmful when chronic. Alpha, a restful attention. Subjectively, images and metaphors arise. The inner critic quiets. Alpha supports daydreaming that is constructive rather than ruminative. Theta, a deeper receptive state where suggestion and rehearsals imprint more strongly. Many forms of learning and memory consolidation use theta band activity.
Meditative practices and rhythmic breathing favor theta. Gamma, short, high-frequency bursts where disparate neural assemblies synchronize, subjectively linked to insight, integration, and a sense of newness becoming stable. Breath mechanics, slow, even breathing influences vagal tone, baroreceptor firing, and the timing of cerebrospinal fluid pulses. Gentle breath holds or forceful breathing patterns, example breath of fire, can be powerful that are not necessary for the basic experiment and should be used only under guidance. Pineal and CSF metaphor. Imagine the cranial space as a gently circulating lake. The pineal is a buoy in that lake, sensitive to light and the rhythm of waves. When breath and heart rhythms slow and deepen, the lake calms and the buoy can rock more slowly, which supports a different sensory bandwidth. That bandwidth is fertile for the imagery and receptive states we need. Again, metaphor maps physiology. It does not invent occult causation. Now, return to practice mechanics, 3 micro techniques to use across the week. These are intentionally short, easy to remember, and safe. 1. The 90-second heart anchor. Sit or stand, soften your shoulders, place your attention at the heart center. Breathe slowly for 30 seconds, approximately 5 breaths. Bring the one-line identity, feel warmth or gratitude in chest for 60 seconds. End by naming one small action you will take in the next hour. Use it morning and before challenging moments. 2. The 2-breath reset. When beta spikes, sharp email, sudden memory, inhale for 4 counts, hold briefly, exhale for 6 counts. Visualize the exhale sweeping away one anxious thought. Repeat twice. It is not a magic eraser, but it creates a brief window in which alpha returns and choice becomes possible. 3. The walking micro-rehearsal. While walking for a few minutes, move attention to heart, match your breath to steps, inhale 2 steps, exhale 3 steps, and silently imagine one scene of the future identity. Keep the scene minimal and sensory. This is how rehearsal travels into life. People ask about group coherence and whether many people practicing together accelerates change. Field observations from retreats report that coordinated heart focus sessions increase group HRV coherence, and that participants often report a stronger subjective sense of connectedness or field presence during group practices. Experimental work using RNG devices and HRV arrays has shown occasional deviations during synchronized group focus, intriguing signals that warrant careful study. The ethical framing. Group coherence appears to amplify subjective experience and can help people sustain new practices, but it is not a guarantee of specific outcomes for any person. Use groups for support, not as a substitute for daily personal practice. Stories keep the possibility credible without promising miracles. Leela, a school teacher in her 30s, came to a retreat feeling stuck in anxiety. Her one-line identity was, "I am someone who enters the classroom with calm presence and curiosity." She began with the 90-second heart anchor, and after 3 days, reported that the urge to micromanage student behavior decreased. Her students' late afternoon energy shifted, and Lila's own sleep improved by subjective report. Her HRV data, taken on a wearable, showed modest increases in coherence during the retreat week. She returned home and kept a daily 90-second practice. Over 3 months, she reported sustainable changes in patience and a new willingness to delegate. She did also work with a therapist to process underlying trauma. The practice was complementary, not a replacement. That combination, personal practice plus professional support, is often the most durable path. Aaron, a mid-50s engineer, had a different trajectory. He reported strong early shifts during week-long immersion, but relapsed into old reactivity after returning to a high-stress job with little support. The lesson in his experience is structural. Identity shifting requires environmental alignment. If your life context perpetuates past patterns, partners, jobs, social circles, you must either prepare your context for change or select micro-choices that incrementally alter it.
The formula works best when the body is given consistent new inputs and when the external environment allows for practice to stick. Resistance management is a crucial practical skill. Expect 3 predictable phases: novelty enthusiasm, initial uplift; resistance backlash, fatigue, irritability, sudden craving for old habits; and stabilization, slow habituation to the new chemistry. When resistance appears, reduce the intensity of practice by 20 to 50%, double down on compassion, and increase micro-rehearsals rather than longer, intense sessions. The body tolerates many small exposures better than one brutal rewiring event. A short script to negotiate with your animal body. I hear you. You have kept me alive and safe. I ask for 3 minutes 5 times a day to try this practice. If anything feels wrong, we'll stop. If you cooperate, I'll feed you with restoration practices: decent sleep, gentle movement, and small pleasures. This script used with steady repetition often decreases the perceived threat level of novelty. Integration into daily life. The real test of identity change is behavior. After a week of practice, ask yourself what behavior you can enact that matches the identity. If your identity sentence includes "choose work that aligns with my values," a practical behavior could be review 1 email and choose 1 thing that aligns, delegate the rest. If the identity includes speak calmly, choose to slow down and take 3 breaths before responding to conflict. Behavior is the currency through which internal states are translated into visible life.
For those inclined to quantify, here are simple measurement suggestions: daily mood scale, 1 to 10, minutes of practice recorded, 1 behavioral indicator, e.g., number of times you said no with calm, 1 physiological signal, if available, resting HRV or sleep latency. Graph these over the week. The goal is pattern recognition. Does the curve trend slightly upward? If not, adjust the practice intensity, context, or the specificity of your identity sentence. A caution about language and claims. Channeled material, like Seth's, offers framework and metaphor. Retreat observations and preliminary experiments offer correlates. None of this replaces medical care. If you are using medication, continue as prescribed. If you have severe mental health conditions, use these practices as adjuncts and coordinate with therapists. We make no claims about curing illnesses. We present reports. Participants reported, and observations were noted. That careful framing protects both you and the integrity of the work. As the week progresses, you may experience moments that Seth-style language calls crossings, sudden psychic shifts where the felt future briefly outweighs the remembered past. These are often small: a skipped charge of anger, a pause that prevents a habitual slip, a new conversation tone that alters a relationship dynamic. When a crossing occurs, treat it as data to be reinforced. Notice it, rejoice quietly, and rehearse more. The mind often underestimates tiny wins. Now, some practical scripts and language to rehearse for identity installation. Words matter, but not because they convince the body themselves, because they direct attention and create imagery. Keep them short, sensory, and present tense. For confidence, I am steady. My breath is even. My voice is soft and clear. Spend 60 to 90 seconds feeling that tone. For relational warmth, I arrive with curiosity. I listen. I return with honesty. Hold the image of a single conversation that embodies this. For rest, rest heals me. I rest without debt. Imagine a 10-minute restorative posture and the feeling of relief. These lines can be repeated in the morning, before sleep, and at micro-pause points. Group practice. If you run or join a coherent session, design it around synchronized heart breathing for 3 to 7 minutes, followed by a shared intention statement read aloud. Collect HRV data if possible. Report observations as, in our group, participants commonly reported deeper ease after sessions, rather than definitive claims. Use group practice for mutual reinforcement and for the emergent intelligence of coordinated intention. Avoid hyping field effects as guarantees. Ethics and leadership. As you begin to embody new states, you may affect others. Use that influence responsibly. Do not pressure others to join your experiments. Model curiosity and invite, rather than insistent proselytizing. If you are in a position of power, manager, parent, remember that embodiment beats advice. Small, consistent calm will shift team norms more than repeated exhortation. A practical integration tool for home life, the 3 pause questions. Before reacting to anything that triggers reactivity, silently ask: 1. What is true? A factual check. 2. What would my future self do here? Aligns action to identity. 3. What is one small next step? Practical behavior. Use breath to hold the pause between question 2 and action. Toward the end of the 7-day experiment, conduct a reflective inventory. Look back at your journal and your metrics. Celebrate small changes and identify where resistance remained. Decide whether to repeat the week, modify the identity statement, or scale one practice into a daily ritual. The point is cumulative learning. Each week is an experiment that informs the next. We have discussed technique, physiology, and ethics. Now a short collection of field evidence presented cautiously. During immersive retreats using these protocols, facilitators have observed increases in subjective well-being, reports of better sleep, and higher HRV coherence across group averages. RNG devices used in controlled sessions have shown occasional deviations correlated with intense group coherence moments. These findings are fascinating, but not conclusive, and should be read as preliminary. Individuals have reported notable life changes, improved relationships, job transitions, and changes in addictive patterns. These are testimonials rather than statistical proof. They are invitations to experiment, not warranties. A final technical note about gamma. Gamma surges are often brief and can be startling, a flash of clarity or a feeling of completion. Some people experience them as sensory amplification, others as quiet settling. They tend to appear after sustained coherence practice. Do not chase gamma. Let it arise as a sign of integration, not as the goal. As we approach the closing of this script, remember that the narrative arc drawn from Seth's phrasing is not about fast fixes. It is about disciplined curiosity. Seth's tone, as channeled through Jane Roberts, teaches persistence with tenderness. Decide, feel, rehearse. Do not rush the body. Invite it. Carry that cadence into your daily life. If you are ready for one more practical set before you go, take 2 minutes now. Sit upright, breathe for 10 slow counts, place attention at the heart, silently speak your one-line identity, and feel for 60 seconds. Finish with one sentence to yourself. Today I will practice as an experiment, and I will record what I notice. That short ritual is a condensed template for the week. A final ethical reminder and practical disclaimer. This material is educational, experiential, and drawn from channel teachings, retreat observations, and emerging scientific language. It is not a medical protocol. If you have health conditions, psychiatric needs, or are on medication, consult qualified professionals before changing treatments.
Use these practices to augment, not replace, professional care when required. One small closing ceremony, Seth labeled and brief. As Seth has suggested through Jane Roberts, choose who you will be before events force you into reaction. Practice the feeling of that choice. Let your days be experiments, not verdicts. Take that as a benediction to carry into practice rather than as a slogan. If you found this useful and want the guided audio tracks, the printable 7-day experiment sheet, and chaptered sessions for deep dives into breath, pineal imagery, and HRV coherence, the link in the description will take you there. If you join a guided week, you will get daily prompts and a community channel for gentle accountability. If not, keep the experiment private and methodical. Measure, observe, and repeat. Walk back to your day with this image. You by the riverbank, choosing one small stone to step on. Each practice is a stone. Choose carefully, step softly, and notice the current change. The crossing is slow, and the new shore is built by consistent feet. You are not the person you remember. You are, always, a field of possibility in which small, repeated acts of attention can rearrange the architecture of the lived world. Try the 7-day experiment. Measure kindly. Show what you learn with curiosity.